Hello everybody. I'm here to talk about Universal Design Systems the Ember way. Don't worry, it's not a different talk than what was in the schedule. I just decided to change the name last minute because maybe it didn't fit, or maybe I just prefer this name. Anyway, so who am I? My name is Chris Manson, part of the Ember Core Learning Team. I am on various social medias, Relate, everywhere that you can find me, apart from GitHub, which is Manson. It's a little bit of a sore point. If anybody knows anybody in GitHub that could free the underscore from its jail cell, please let me know, and I will become Relate everywhere. So you'll probably recognize this photo from all of my socials if you have seen me before. That's my little sidekick, Rodney. A lot has changed in the last year or so. You know, we've gone through a lot together with this whole COVID malarkey. But personally, I have collected 3 extra sidekicks. I now have Susie with the good smile. She's always got this kind of toothy grin, which is quite funny. And I now have 2 kids, which is a very busy household. So I said a lot has changed. This has all been a bit of an experience for me, getting ready for this talk, getting ready to speak in front of people again. Last time I had the kind of anticipation of this, it was all pulled out from under us going to EmberConf, and we all had to do recordings in the white void. And it's not the same experience. This is much more fun. But anyway, let's get to why I'm actually here. Let's talk about what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to start with a definition of design systems. It's not going to be a proper definition. It will be the definition that will apply for exactly 20 minutes so that the rest of my talk is consistent. And I'm going to go through what I mean by a universal design system, which is kind of cool, one weird trick that will help you build a design system a little bit more usefully, and how you might be able to get one if you wanted a universal design system. And since we are here with a real audience, I get to do what I love doing. Hands up, everybody who has heard of design systems before. Yes, look at that, so many hands, that's amazing. Okay, so let me ask you another question. How many of you think that a design system is not a design system unless it has like a ready-made component library that you can just use out of the box? Okay, so it's a requirement. Interesting. Okay, and not a lot of hands. That's interesting. Okay, so it sounds like there's a bit of a gap between what a design system is definitionally. So let's go here. Let's go and find some definitions that I found online. We'll go through them. There's a few here. So a design system is a complete set of standards intended to manage design at scale. Nice and vague. It doesn't actually give you anything that tells you what a design system is. So let's move on to the next one. Let's see if we can find a better definition. A design system is a collection of documents, articles, examples, code samples, screenshots, design guidelines, components, philosophies, and other digital assets for a product design company. It was doing so well until that last line. Why can't people who aren't product design companies use design systems? Shouldn't it be for everybody? Okay, let's see what we can do. Let's see if there's a better one. A design system is a systematic approach to product development, complete with guidelines, principles, philosophies, and code. What do you think? Is that a better one? I quite like this one. This is my favorite. It's interesting specifically because of that word systematic. That's the key to this definition. I really like it. And this is from a blog, wrangle.io. I have no idea who they are. But they do actually have another interesting paragraph in that same blog. There's a common misconception that a design system is just a style guide or a component library. In our opinion, those are both subcomponents of a design system. So back to the question earlier on, you can have them. It doesn't actually say if they're required some subcomponents here, but you know, how many of you actually thought of a component library when I said design system? I all thought, oh, that's interesting. Okay. So I have nothing against component libraries, but they are different. They're not the same as what my definition of a design system is. They're good. You get a list of all the components that you can possibly use. If you're lucky, you get some documentation on each of the components on how to use it. But one thing that is a little bit more rare when you're looking at these component libraries is a narrative on how to think about design for your product or whatever the thing that you're building. Very useful because you should be aspiring to think about the design of your system in the same way as your colleagues, or in the same way as the people who are working on the design system itself, the designers. And if you don't have a narrative that helps you think in that same way, it's not fully a design system, in my opinion. I strongly believe in that. That's kind of a big thing for me. And because of that, I really strongly believe that it needs to be incredibly easy to document your design system. So Storybook, again, it's great. It's lots of bells and whistles. But if you've ever tried to put some documentation, just the docs in there, there's a lot of hurdles you need to jump. So this is kind of getting to our definition, what I believe about design systems. Let's move on to look at some other public design systems that are out there in the wild. So, in preparation for this talk, I went Google, like public design systems, things that I could look at. And I found this, A to Z of over 100 design systems. Whew, that is a lot of resources. And I think that is impossible for somebody with 2 kids to ever make a dent in researching these. So I went looking for maybe something that was more of like a graded list of design systems. So this one's better because it's got likes and downloads, so some stats, and I could filter them or order them by how many likes. You can't order it by likes on this page. It's just, anyway, not important. But something was funny about this list. I know of a few design systems, like material design is a very common one. It's not on the list. I'm like, why isn't it on the list? Why wouldn't they include that? This is only for Figma design systems. So I'm not going to open the can of worms on whether or not you should put your entire design system only in Figma. I am happy to talk about that at the happy hour later, or you can tweet at me if you're on the stream. Always happy to argue about that, but that's not what this talk is about. So I finally did a bit more research and I found this. Somebody else did the hard work, the 10 best design systems. It limits the amount of research I needed to go. It's really cool. I would recommend going and looking at this article because they do a good comparison of the differences, the things that are actually included in different people's design systems. They list the features of a design system against each one. The commonalities are interesting. Most of them include something about typography and colors and things like that, which you would generally think of when you think of a design system. Some of them talk about icons, and a few of them even include animations. So their companies, their product, the way that you do animations inside their design system is important enough that that needs to be there in the documentation. The other thing, if you look at each of the details of those design systems, is that they're huge. Like any of these documents are thousands of pages in some cases. Like this is material design, and each of the links is into a different section of different stuff. You have teams and teams and teams of people, and this is all. I can't show any of the details here for a 30-minute talk. We'd be here for hours. So I went for a search, and I went looking for like a small design system or like smallest design system. Couldn't find anything. So I decided to make it. I present to you the official smallest design system in the world. And this is tinydesignSystem.com. It is live right now. It's not in progress. That's it. It's done. There is exactly one rule, and that rule is use only HTML and no CSS styling. One rule. What do we think? So, hands up who thinks that's a design system. Okay, we've got some doubters. That's fine. But it's back to our definition from before. It's systematic. You're thinking about designing something, you're going, oh, do you know what I can do? I can add some color. Go to the design system. Only use HTML, no CSS. No color. That's fine. It helps you make the decisions about your design. Obviously, it's a bit silly. Like, I wouldn't recommend using this for the next big Silicon Valley startup. You're not going to get investment. Your users aren't going to like what you're doing. I like these sort of extreme examples to try and help you think about the edges of our definitions. So let's start here. This is the starting point. Let's expand on this. Let's make a medium design system or intermediate design system instead of a tiny one. So as we discovered, looking at the other ones, we need something that will allow us to write lots of text. Like we need something that can deal with text. But not only that, I want something that people who maybe aren't technically minded, who are designers, they know HTML maybe, but aren't like get into the command line. I want a system that they could use, something easier than maybe Storybook. Not dumping on Storybook. I like Storybook, but it's hard to use sometimes. So that's the kind of thing that I would need to build our next level up from here. And I happen to have it. This is Field Guide. Field Guide is an Empress project. It is, like if you've seen any of my other talks, there's a pattern to Empress projects. There's things like quick starts, and I think you can see it there. It tells you like a few commands to run to get up and started. And there's also like a super quick start that allows you to click one button and it deploys to Netlify and creates a repo for you, and we'll see that in a second. We're going to do that. We're going to go through the deploy to Netlify just to show what it looks like. And this is back to the point that I made about I want this to be accessible to people who maybe aren't technically minded. And it's not that I don't think that people could learn it. It's that I don't want it to be a blocker. When you want to go and you want to write some text about how to think about design, you don't want to have to stop what you're doing and then go and think like a computer for 5 minutes or 5 hours to try and get it to work. Right, so let's do the super quick start. So if you want to do this today, you can. You can go to the Field Guide README. You can click the Netlify button. It does a little bit of magic. Connect to GitHub, give it all of your details, name the thing. We're going to go, I think, Emberfest. Did I spell it right? I did. Fantastic. And that goes off and deploys a statically generated Ember app for you. So it builds for a little while, and it actually creates a repo. I think I show the repo, and it's empty here because it doesn't populate it until the build finishes. So we'll skip ahead. We'll skip ahead to the files that are actually in the repo it generates for you. That's a lot of files. This is like, I don't know if you saw, there was an article a few weeks ago of like a rendering of GitHub repos, but this is all of the files that are generated automatically for you. You can't actually see the circles, but in the top left, those blue ones, they're the markdown. And all these other colors down here are like JavaScript files, a YAML file, a Travis YAML file. You shouldn't be using Travis, that's a separate issue. There's like a whole list of the different types that you have. It's a bit extreme and it's a bit confusing, especially if we're catering for people who may not be technically minded. They see this and they go, this is a bit complicated. The answer up until this point has been, just ignore those files. But I don't like that. That's not a good experience for people. So I went and I built something. I've invented too many things for this talk. So this is a super secret project of mine. It's a button that I've hidden somewhere. It's not private, and I thought that people wouldn't find it, but a colleague of mine has been following my GitHub, and he noticed it, and he was like, what's this thing? I was like, God. You know who you are if you're watching. So once we click this button, go through the same process. So we only have 3 types of files. We have JS files, JSON files, and Markdown files. So what this is using is a little toy project of mine called Bottled. The goal of that is to assist Empress projects like this. So Empress projects need an Ember app as like their host app, but I want to take that host app and like put it over here so you don't have to worry about it. As you can see, I wasn't able to kill all of the files. I don't know if you can see them there, but like one of the files I wasn't able to kill because this is actually an add-on is the test dummy environment config JSON. I say JS, and it's like, I'd love to be able to kill. And I think that there are 3 people here at this conference that know exactly how I can finish that work. And I will find you, and I will ask you for help to finish that. Anyway, so I digress. We are now at the output of the thing that we generated. So this is the Field Guide Ember Fest Slim one. And as you can see, you are writing your documentation in Markdown. And I just happened to do it in the GitHub UI here, just so you could see it's just Markdown. That's all you need to do. So I'm starting to write the contents of our new design system, like putting down my thoughts, what the aspirations of this thing is going to be. But this is, again, too much for a 30-minute talk. So I'm going to use something that you should be familiar with anyway. I'm going to steal. And I'm going to steal from the Ember style guide. The Ember style guide is already using field guide, so we'll be able to copy and paste most of this across, which will be fantastic. Bit of history on the Ember style guide. It originated as like a collection of common components that were used, and I think it was Mel's idea at the very beginning. We moved from like a collection of common components for like the Ember websites to a really good aspirational set of components that we wanted to use in the Ember websites, but we never got around to actually implementing them because there wasn't really a push to use it. But then two things came at once. We had the Ember website redesign RFC that landed, and then we had Ember Octane. Ember Octane seems like 1,000 years ago now, and for people who were Ember users for a long time, it's just another update. But there was something subtle about Ember Octane that us weathered Ember developers don't necessarily notice. The fact that suddenly JS became optional for quite a lot of what you're doing meant that you could focus on HTML and components, these, the templates, and because we're using angle brackets, you're able to, if you squint at an angle bracket component, it can kind of feel familiar for people who know what HTML is. It's not exactly the same. You do have to learn a tiny bit of syntax, but it feels familiar, especially if you design your components in such a way that it uses normal HTML semantics. And why is this relevant to what we're talking about today? How many of you know that you can always just drop HTML into a Markdown document? HTML is valid Markdown. So it would then follow that it would be nice to have a tool where you could just drop HTML-like components into Markdown and it would just render them. And that is what Field Guide actually does. And that can be really quite useful in certain cases. Oh, that's a bit washed out. But this here is a component that renders out your color palette. So you can have lots of these on a page. And this is the API of it. So you pass in the color that the background wants to use. You pass in the name. We call it the brand color and the variable that you want to use. So stuff that you would see in all of the design systems that we showed earlier. But with one extra little bit of fun at the top. You can see that there's you can just about see that there's a AA tick, AAA tick, and at the bottom it says fail, AA tick. That is checking your accessibility against your common font sizes and your common font colors. So they're common to your whole design system. These are the types of font that you would have. And it's very useful for people who are referencing your design systems to know, ooh, if I'm going to use this as a background color, how big does my text need to be? What color does my text need to be? Okay, so moving on, this is allowing us to think about our design system in terms of just HTML or HTML-like syntax and focusing on just CSS. And this idea of thinking in terms of HTML and CSS is the core to what I'm trying to propose as the universal design system. If you are building your design system as just HTML and CSS, it doesn't matter what framework you're using to put things on the screen, it will work. Because, JSX, Vue, Ember, it's still HTML-ish in the DOM. It works. Okay, so this is all abstract so far, so let me give you a concrete example. One of my favorite achievements of the Ember style guides is this component here. It is a background shape, is what we call it. So you can't actually see it on the washed out screen. So what you actually have, if you go to emberjs.com now, you'll see it at the top of the screen. You have these kind of like concentric squares that are like white outlines, but they continue into the next div. If you look at the code for that, there's no components. This isn't a component that did that. The only thing that did that is the shape box's bottom. Yeah, shape box's bottom. And it's a smart CSS helper because you then have selectors that add the follow-on orange. That's a different div. So you can think about your design system in smart ways just using HTML and CSS. So that's kind of wrapping up what I'm talking about. When you're writing your design system, this is how you should be thinking about it. Try and only do it in HTML and CSS as much as possible. But that's only half of the story. How do we actually consume this universal design system in a universal way? So let's go back to our slim, super secret design system that we're building, and we'll copy across all of the Ember style guide stuff. And I present to you Ember Slim Guide. Yes, this is essentially a joke, but it's exactly the same as the Ember style guide with a lot of the same components, but there's not a single Ember component in this. This is all just HTML and CSS, and it all looks very familiar. It all works the same way. So we've built our add-on. We've got it as HTML and CSS. Nothing magic so far. Now we want to actually deploy it in a way that it can be consumed universally. And I'm going to do that to NPM because, you're not cool if you're not deploying to NPM. And it's not just going to deploy it like a normal Ember add-on, where we just, hit NPM deploy and it works. We're going to use one weird trick to publish the compiled CSS into the package that goes to NPM. So all you need to do is add this pre-publish only, and it clears the dist folder and then runs build before you push to NPM. There's one extra trick where the default blueprint for Ember apps makes sure that it doesn't deploy dist, so you have to remove that from your NPM ignore. But that's it. So who here knew about pre-publish only before? Okay, wow, this is cool. That's good. The only is a bit of a weird thing. Just a quick aside. That's like a historical thing. This used to run also when you did your NPM install, like in NPM 5 and beforehand, and then they wanted to remove that functionality, so they had to. It's legacy software. It happens. Okay, so that is now it deployed. You run your NPM deploy or NPM publish. It's now in NPM, but that's only half the story. If you were already using something that has an NPM workflow, you can NPM install this thing and make sure that that file is included in your CSS somehow. But let's do another one weird trick to make it work as just a single file include. Who here knows about unpackage? Okay, more people than I expected. Yeah, so this is fun. This is a CDN. I think technically it's just some sort of reverse proxy, but it's like a CDN for NPM packages where you can access a single file inside that NPM package. All we need to do to include that compiled CSS into the thing that we're using is make this magic URL that points to the right place. So what we're going to do is we're going to include our now new design system into our tiny design system website. It's a little bit of blasphemy because it's adding CSS to the thing that says not adding CSS, but we're going to do it anyway because it's simple. And that's all we need to do. So you add a normal CSS link at the top, and as long as this unpackaged URL is correct, it will include it properly. And then I just added one of the classes that's defined in the design system to add some styles and bring some padding in, and we get this as the result. very little work, and suddenly a website that was built with just HTML starts to feel like the design of the system that we wanted to build. I don't know about you, but this feels pretty universal to me. So what do I want? What do I want as a takeaway from this talk? I would like people to try out Field Guide. It's been used in production for quite a while now with the Ember Style Guide. All of the Ember websites are slowly moving over to it. It's, again, cleaning up a lot of legacy code. If you follow me on Twitter, there's going to be some other interesting things coming out about Field Guide soon that's less related to design systems, but more about like a wholesale replacement of Ember CLI add-on docs. But that is a different talk, and we won't talk about that anymore. You can always reach out if you have questions, or we'll do our little huddle over there. And all that is left is for me to say thank you. You can find me on these socials, and especially the middle one. I do Twitch streaming on Thursday mornings. I had to cancel today because I had another engagement, so I won't be next week, but I'll be doing it the week after. We usually have a bunch of people from the Ember community chatting away and like helping out, especially Anne, who has saved my bacon on everything CSS for a long time. Thank you very much. And that's it. Thank you, everybody.